Good morning.
Good morning.
How did everybody sleep last night?
Good.
Fantastic. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's, usually I get a little bit. I mean, it's Monday, right? So, did anybody suffer from what's called Sunday night insomnia? Anybody heard of that before?
Not cells.
There you go. There you go. You know, I'm actually a pretty lucky guy. I get to do a lot of really interesting and fun things, as you saw. I get to be on TV, and I get to do a lot of these interviews and things like that. But I always like to share with people some of the things that actually happen kind of behind the scenes on some of those shows, because it can get pretty interesting pretty quickly. For the Oprah Winfrey show that you saw that I was on, it was pretty interesting because one of the things you didn't see in the clip was Oprah actually invited several women up from the audience to get on the bed with her. So there's these 3 women on the bed with Oprah, and Oprah's like, Michael, why don't you come on and get on the bed? Now, I can't say that I've ever been invited into a bed with 4 women before, but my wife was sitting in the front row. And so chances were I wasn't really going to be jumping in bed with 4 women, specifically with my wife sitting there in the front row. When I was working with Rosie O'Donnell, something even more interesting happened. So we had done the show, and Rosie's a patient of mine, and I treat her for obstructive sleep apnea, which is where she stops breathing in her sleep. It's a pretty serious condition, and I have her using something called a CPAP machine. So after the show, my wife and I are in the dressing room. My wife likes to come with me to all of the different shows. And Rosie walks in and she said, they won't leave. I said, what do you mean? She said, the audience won't leave. They've got questions about sleep. Would you be willing to go back out there and answer their questions? Well, sure. So I grab the microphone and I go out there for about an hour and answer questions from the audience about sleep. They all file out, and then all of the crew came from behind the scenes and sat in the stands, and I answered questions for about another hour just on sleep. It's amazing how many people have questions about sleep. But the thing that was actually more interesting to me than that fact that people have a lot of questions about sleep were the questions that I get. The #1 question that I get without fail, what bed should I buy? Which was very surprising to me. I really thought I was going to get a different type of question. The #1 question, what bed should I buy? The #2 question that I get is a question that every single person in this room gets on a regular basis. What bed do you sleep on? Right? Right? Everybody probably comes in and says, well, what bed do you sleep on? What do you think? I get that question all the time. By the way, the #3 question is, how do you stop snoring? We're working on that. We're not quite there yet. It's pretty interesting. So I had this question, and I don't like to be unprepared. I don't like to not be able to answer a question, especially since it's the #1 question that I get. So I said, well, there must be a way to get some information to be able to recommend a surface on which to sleep. So I went to the medical literature, which is what I generally will do if I have a question, because I wanted to find out what characteristics of a bed could actually influence the way somebody sleeps. So within the medical literature, I found that there are actually 4 things. So if anybody's taking notes, now's the time to pull out the pad, pull out the pen. I want everybody to write down the points. 3 of these points you already know. They're no-brainers. They should be very obvious. Okay, I could probably say, you know, what do you guys think they are? And you'd probably come up with them. Well, let's just go ahead and do that. What is there? Let's see. What do you think at least 1 or 2 of the attributes are of a surface that would help somebody sleep? Anybody? Reduction in pressure, so support. Absolutely, that's one of them. Anybody else? Comfort, exactly, that's another one. Anybody got any other ideas of what the other 2 might be?
Partner disturbance.
No, price actually is not one of the ones that's going to affect somebody's sleep. It may affect their wallet. What's that?
Partner disturbance.
Exactly, partner disturbance or motion control. Those are the 3 that are the obvious ones. But there's a 4th one that I learned that I was a little bit surprised about.
Temperature.
Temperature, that is correct. It is temperature. But here's what was interesting about temperature. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I thought, because if you look in the medical literature, people sleep better in a cooler environment. So I figured it needs to be cooler. Turns out that's not the case. It needs to be thermoregulatory or thermoneutral. If you're looking for a buzzword, that's it. Thermoneutrality. And here's what I mean by thermoneutrality. Thermoneutrality. If you were to Google thermoneutrality, it'll come back as 29 degrees Celsius, which is approximately 84.9 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? It's keeping the body in an area on the surface that is within thermoneutrality. I'm going to explain exactly how we do that and exactly what that means in a minute. So, okay, I have to keep the body temperature somewhat constant. It's the swings in body temperature that seem to wake people up. I have to have a surface on which there's not a whole lot of motion transfer. It has to be supportive, and it has to be comfortable. That seems like a pretty interesting thing. So, okay, I figured this out. So I talked to my business partner, and I said, well, what should we do? Should I write another book? Should I do a thing with Oprah on TV? She said, well, why don't you look and see which beds are out there that have all 4 of those things? I couldn't find any. I found plenty that had 2, some that even had 3 of the components, but I couldn't find any one bed that had all 4. So then I went back and I said, well, what do you think we should do? And she said, why don't you build a bed? I didn't know I could build a bed. I didn't know that was something I was allowed to do. So I said, okay, well, how do we go about building a bed? She said, well, you usually do these talks for different industries within the bedding industry, talk to a lot of manufacturers. Why don't we let some of the people know that you've met that you're interested in building a bed? If you think I was popular before, I became really popular at that point because lots of the manufacturers said, Michael, we love it. Come on in. But the other thing that was very interesting to me was they all said roughly the same thing. They said, Michael, we're so excited that you're going to get involved in building a bed. You know what? We've got a bed right here. We're going to slap your name on the front. Checks will show up in the mail. Now, my wife liked this idea. Okay? I didn't. I don't want to slap my name on anything. Okay? I like to get neck deep and dirty on everything that I do. I want to know how it works. I want to build it. I want to get into it. I said, guys, I appreciate the offer, but no, really, I want to build the bed. And here's what I'm looking for. I want something that's got a zero gravity feel, excellent comfort, very little, movement, and it's got that thermo-neutrality. They said, Dr. Breus, you don't understand. Bed checks. I said, no, seriously, you don't understand. That's just not how I work. So I went to find somebody who would understand my vision. And I came in and I said, guys, I've done this presentation a couple of times. Here's what I want. I want a bed that has zero gravity feel, excellent comfort, very little movement or motion transfer, and thermo-neutrality. The folks at IBC said, okay, let's see if we can do that. They decided to take on the challenge. It took approximately 1 year and 9 different iterations to get to this bed right here. This is called the signature in my series. It's because it has the signature feel that I was looking for, okay? It is the bed that I think approximately 50 to 60% of people will actually enjoy and feel most comfortable on. And it has all 4 of those characteristics in it. But I didn't know how to build a bed. I had no idea how beds were built. Does everybody here, by the way, know how beds are built? Pretty much? I didn't know this. Turns out that you start out with price. Then you take dealer margin out of it. Then you take manufacturer margin out of it. And the money that you have left over, you split between labor and resources. And then you configure it a bunch of different ways. That's how beds are built. Well, I didn't know that. I didn't really care how much my bed cost. I was looking for a very particular feel. And that's how it was created. We had several what I would consider to be spirited discussions about how is this bed going to be made. At one point in time, I had a fairly large gentleman stand up, put his hands on the table in front of me and say, Michael, that's impossible. It's not going to work. You know what my answer was? I guess I just have to find somebody who's going to figure out how to make it work. Lo and behold, 2 weeks later, what I thought was impossible was become possible. And we were able to get through a lot of these different ideas. We had to source things from outside of the country. We had to do all kinds of different things. 9 different iterations. 1 year later, we create this signature. So I think, wow, this is great. But then it kind of dawns on me. Everybody's not going to like one particular feel. I need to have a line of beds. So I went to my patients, because that's where I get most of my inspiration. As Warren said, I'm a practicing sleep doctor. I see patients almost every single week. And so I went to them to try and understand what were some of their issues and how could those issues maybe be solved by different feels of the bed. Here's what I learned. There are different demographics and there are different people with different conditions that will require different surfaces. So if you look over here at the monogram, this bed was specifically designed for those people who walk through the door who say, I want a bed that's, hard as a rock, thick as a board, although, you know who those people are, right? So sometimes they're from different cultures, so you see that happening a lot with the Asian culture, with the Indian culture. You may even see that with folks who are over the age of 60, 65. When I was growing up, they used to say, stick a board under your bed, right? Make it as hard as a rock. Turns out that's not actually very good for your sleep, okay? So we created a bed that has those support characteristics, and has some of that feel to it, but however, isn't as firm as a lot of people think they need. Because you realize, the floor is very firm, but it's not particularly supportive, right? You need a bed that's supportive, but that has a firm feel. That's where the monogram comes in. The monogram Gold is an interesting bed because we created this one for folks with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and arthritis. One of my sleep centers is in a pain center. People in pain don't sleep. It's just how it is. We have to figure out ways to help them sleep better. We needed a much softer feel for those people. And you would think, well, wait a second, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, arthritis, shouldn't they have, more support? Turns out they actually need a much softer feel because their nerve endings literally scream when they lie down on beds that are too firm and will prevent them from sleeping. Again, we have the Signature, which was the original one created. Then we go over to the Signature Elite. Well, I also learned that there's something else that goes on, is there's two people in a bed usually, and sometimes there's over 100, 150-pound weight difference between these two people. So we created the Signature Elite with those types of people in mind, right? So we wanted to have a bed that had the support characteristics for somebody who maybe was 250, 275 pounds or bigger, but yet maybe they had a bed partner that had significantly less weight to them, and we wanted them to be able to feel comfortable and have that sort of luxurious feel to it. The final bed is the Signature Platinum, and that is just like the Signature, but with a bit more luxury to it, right? That's kind of the plushest, the most luxurious of the line that we created. That's the bed that I sleep on.